All right, there it is.
All right. For conclusion on our project, not everybody has finished every phase, so we can't make like a true conclusion of everything. But at this time, everybody has, in our self-monitoring replication, has shown an increase in on-task behavior when they're using the self-monitoring app. Um, and working with the data we do have for everybody, if you analyze the difference between the average baseline data and the average intervention data for each participant, it shows improvement of on-task behavior ranging from as small as 15% up to 28%, depending on the participant.
So limitations of our project. Like Elliot said, we essentially have all the limitations from the source study, with the academic bit not being tracked, generalization probes. We also obviously had a very small sample size of just 5 individuals, so we're not terribly widespread on age, gender, or any of those demographics. Even honestly, school and a specific section of a course is quite a specific subsect of people to run a study on here. The participant serving as an observer, as much as we obviously try to stay neutral and not have it affected, I'm sure all of us knew what was happening because we are also conducting the experiment. So that obviously kind of leads to some limitations there. The iConnect app itself was very limiting. There were only a certain amount of settings for age and gender restrictions. Only male and female of us know other identifications and identities there. And then the age, I can't exactly remember what it went to, but we had to essentially fudge some of our ages because it was so limited. And then workload variations. This is kind of the one where I think it would be very interesting if we had that data just based off, if we're cramming for 2 exams versus 1, or we don't have an exam that week, or we've already finished our assignments. We aren't recording, obviously, all of the time that we're working on coursework. So it's, that's not accounted for, and that's definitely a pretty big variable. And then variations in frequency of distractions. This is another one too, where if we were getting, a ton of texts and phone calls versus nobody getting in touch with us at all, no one around, like that's also just going to definitely impact our data. And it's not exactly tracked. And then, like I said, similar to the source study, we didn't look at any correlation between if the on-task increases or decreases are having an impact on any assignment or exam scores. And then just the last one, just being the static camera angle. I think ideally we would be in, a clinic and just be able to kind of observe the whole environment, see what's being worked on, and all that. But those essentially are kind of the main limitations that we have. And then our references.
Great. Good job. You're welcome to continue recording for like the questions portion, but you can also stop the recording if you prefer. So let's give you that option. So you guys did an excellent job. I wouldn't have known that you were missing a participant from your group if you hadn't told me. So nice job, like not missing a beat there. You guys were super thorough, and I honestly don't have a lot of questions because you addressed a lot of them when you were talking about your conclusions and limitations. A couple of things though that I was just wondering if you could kind of like reflect and share on your share based on your experience, was whether you noticed kind of like some social desirability or like Hawthorne effect, the fact that you knew that somebody is going to be watching like even your baseline videos and you were going to be reporting back on your data. It wasn't a true baseline, obviously. So how do you think that impacted your behavior?
For me, I know that I was very aware because I found that for some reason my PC was only letting me record if I had the camera option available. So I just had myself kind of in the right side of the screen the whole time. If I was, doing something on the computer, I would obviously be looking any sort of like mouth movements I would make. And then there were even times, where I was kind of talking to it obviously would be Charisse just kind of explaining like, hey, I'm going to the bathroom. Like obviously that's going to count as off task, just letting you know kind of what I'm doing. But I think I was definitely pretty aware of what was going on.
I think it was interesting too, since you can't see the whole setting because of the camera angle. When I would be off task, obviously I'd want to show that in the video. So like if I picked up my phone or something, I try to like hold a little higher just so it's more obvious, I guess, that I'm off task. Same with if someone like walked into the room, I'd be sure to like turn around and show that I'm talking to that person. So I think there was maybe a little bias there as well.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of like, I was like overly consciously aware that I was recording, knowing that I was going to be watching myself and then somebody else was going to be watching me. So I was constantly like looking at the camera or looking at the timer that was on the camera. And I also had some like technical issues where I was able to record on my computer, but I wasn't able to watch videos while I was recording. And so there was a lot of those kind of like minute things that I had to work around in some of the first recordings that I didn't end up posting for the baseline because I was trying to figure out how like to get a solid 15 minutes without any technical difficulties. But I was definitely very overly cautious, like making sure I wasn't looking off the screen too many times or like something like that that could be perceived as off task behavior if I was looking up at a second monitor or something like that.
Yeah, if I compare it to the setting of what we were replicating, which was kids in classroom, and they're just being tracked for a 15-minute session, it's different in that I chose that I was going to take data for 15 minutes on myself. So I might, if I was going to go get something to eat, which wouldn't happen in science class, I wouldn't record data. I'd go eat and I'd come back and then take 15 minutes of data on myself. So you're like missing out on a big chunk there. And in a similar fashion as Karina, I found out 13 minutes into a 15-minute session that if I minimized my webcam, it stopped recording. So like I lost sections of data because it just didn't record for whatnot. So that was another aspect.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point though about kind of the like EOs that were in place that like, yeah, you don't have to start your data collection until like you're truly ready to like sit there and focus for 15 minutes. And so I think that's an important thing to kind of think about. I think despite your limitations, you all had nice, beautiful data that it looked like there was a treatment effect and that there was some aspect of this that was effective in changing your behavior, I think, for pretty much everybody's data. So even though you probably don't want to continue implementing all of the steps that you had to do as kind of part of this project, are there aspects of kind of this process and like intervention that you would continue as you're continuing your coursework and studying for the BCBA exam, things like that?
I personally was pretty surprised at how much I liked the self-monitoring because I think, like I explained on our meeting, like I've not really had concrete studying habits necessarily. But once I switched obviously off the chime, because I didn't really love that, but that flashing prompt, I really did kind of find that I wasn't having to, I wasn't manipulating the data and like, oh, I'm an intervention, like I'm doing this thing. Like it really truly was something where I would hit the button and I was like, okay, I got 10 more minutes. And, it kind of kept me aware of where I was at and like this little like competition with myself, which I guess is just like something that I wouldn't have really thought would be a thing. But yeah, just that going off and like being able to hold myself accountable through secondary device. I definitely think it's useful, and I'm gonna at least try it here and there. Maybe not that app, because I don't necessarily love that app, but something like it.
I would agree that I was a little bit surprised that it did keep me on task. There were a couple times where I had my phone in my hand and it dinged and I felt like I got caught. But really the key factor, I guess, or the bigger one is that the device I was running the app through is the device I would receive text messages on. And sometimes I'd hear it buzz and I'd see the little drop down, but the big screen is a "Are you on task?" And so it wasn't even the 5 minute, it was just that my whole screen was taken up by like, hey, you should be working. Like I can't remember the exact wording, but so that one I think helped more, just having my screen indicating what I should be doing.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would
I will-
agree with.
Go ahead.
Oh, you can go. Oh, thank you. I would agree with both Nathan and Jared. Specifically with what Jarrett said, it's almost like a competition with yourself. I had the full 15 minutes of on task behavior, and I think it was because I didn't really want to mess up or have like off task behavior if I'm tracking it, you know? So I would probably use apps similar to this in the future. Not this app, because I think there are some limitations for it, obviously, but if there's another app that can like even show you your data later, that would be really cool to just kind of see like, oh yes, I was on task, no, I wasn't, like comparing those two things.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it was very like naturally reinforcing to be able to like when I chose the chime option. So when the chime would go off and I was on task, I was like, yes, like I am doing my work right now. And then when I did have those moments of hitting no, it was kind of like you get a little bit bummed with yourself. So I would definitely love to use something like this as I continue to move through my coursework for sure.
Yeah, going off that too, even I think the fact that we didn't really have any reinforcement outside of, like assumedly like better grades if we're putting in the effort. I do think like there was that kind of level of pride when it would ding and you're like, yep, I am on task, and like I'll show you device. And so I think that for me was that bit of reinforcement. Which again, it all just kind of felt like this because we set it up. I mean, obviously we're replicating a study, but it felt like we almost tricked ourselves into it. Like the awareness stuff that I talked about is still there, but I still just like, I didn't think I would care about like being on task with how loose my studying is typically. But so that was reinforcing for me for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely, as you guys have been talking and as I was listening to your presentation, definitely brought me back to like times where I've been studying for the BCBA exam, studying for my psych licensing exams, where it's like you have to spend a lot of time just like spending time paying attention to the content. And like I do recommend, like as you get closer to that, kind of identifying like a strategy where you can be using some system that works for you. I think my system, like across kind of like multiple of those experiences, was like I would say I'm gonna have a full hour as my interval, and I'm going to start my count up timer for 50 minutes. And if I work continuously for 50 minutes, then I get a 10-minute break at the end. And if something happens, I get distracted, I'm going to stop my timer. And that's a bummer because it's just going to be longer before I can get up and have my full 10 minutes of reinforcement. Sorry, my dog's clearly seeking attention, but so times like that where it was like, I just really need to focus. I really just need to dive into a ton of content. It was nice to figure out a system that worked for me, figure out ways to access reinforcement too, of like, okay, I'm going to take a 10-minute break and I'm going to refill my coffee and do something and spend time really reading all of my texts. So it's good to identify kind of these things now, even if this isn't the exact system that you'll end up using for yourself. So yeah, I don't have any other questions. You guys did a really nice job. I can tell you were really committed to this project and have done a nice job kind of reflecting on the results you got. So if you guys don't have any questions or anything else, we can end there.
I don't think I do that I can think of.
All right.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank
warm.
you.
Yeah. Have a good one, everyone.
So, all right. Good night.
See ya.